Welcome back to the deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're diving into, well, it's a bit of a guided tour, really, through a truly massive piece of work, Surendranath Dasgupta's A History of Indian Philosophy, Volume 2. Our mission, let's say, isn't just to skim it. We want to pull out the really key insights from this amazing text and show you, the real depth and, frankly, the rigor of Indian intellectual traditions. It's way beyond that casual, mystical speculation idea people sometimes have. Volume 1 kind of laid the groundwork, the early schools where the big ideas came from. Match of Volume 2, well, that's where everything really kicks into high gear. This is where these philosophies mature, get challenged, refined, where they really argue it out. It's like an intellectual arena, ideas getting sharpened against each other.
Exactly. And Dasgupta's work, it's just pivotal. He makes such a strong case for Indian philosophy as this rigorous, argumentative, analytical discipline, genuinely on par with Western traditions, sometimes, frankly, ahead of them in certain ways. And Volume 2 dives right into these incredibly sophisticated worldviews. They weave together metaphysics, what reality is, with logic, epistemology, how we know things, ethics, and even soteriology, the path to liberation. It's incredibly comprehensive.
Okay, so let's unpack that right away. This idea that it's not passive contemplation, but active intellectual wrestling. That's central for Dasgupta, right? How does he actually show that in Volume 2? What does that wrestling look like on the page?
Well, he shows it constantly. What's really fascinating is how each school didn't just, develop its ideas in a vacuum. They actually refined their arguments, their identities, by responding directly to critiques from other schools. Think of it like a centuries-long debate club. It's this dialectic, this back and forth that really drove Indian thought. So one school puts out a theory on, say, the self. Another school picks it apart, logically. That forces the first school to strengthen its arguments, clarify things, dig deeper into understanding reality, knowledge, liberation. It's really dynamic.
That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, let's take a specific example like Buddhism. How did that process transform Buddhist ideas in this volume?
Well, it's a huge evolution he traces. The Dasgupta walks us through the journey from early Buddhism, maybe think Theravada, into the really complex world of Mahayana. And the shift there is profound. It moves from focusing on individual liberation, the arhat ideal, achieving enlightenment for oneself, towards this much bigger vision, universal salvation. That's embodied in the Bodhisattva ideal. The Bodhisattva actually vows to postpone their own final nirvana to help every single being get there first.
Yeah.
It changes the whole game.
Wow. And within Mahayana, you get these really mind-bending thinkers, like Nagarjuna and his Madhyamaka school. What's the core idea there? How does Dasgupta help us wrap our heads around it?
Nagarjuna's concept of shunyata, emptiness, is key, but it's so easily misunderstood. Dasgupta clarifies it's not about nihilism, not that nothing exists. It's that phenomena lack inherent existence. Nothing exists independently by itself. Everything arises dependently, prateti sasamutpada. Like, a wave isn't separate from the ocean, right? It's empty of waveness on its own. Nagarjuna uses this razor-sharp logic to carve out a radical middle path. It avoids both eternalism, things existing forever on their own, and nihilism, nothing existing at all. It's incredibly subtle.
Okay, so that's already pretty deep. Then we get the Yogācāra school, the mind-only school. That sounds like it takes the idea of reality construction even further.
It really does. Yogācāra takes a different tack. It argues that what we perceive as, like, the external world, is fundamentally constructed by consciousness. They introduce this amazing concept, the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness. Think of it as this deep, subconscious reservoir holding all our past experiences, karmic seeds, latent tendencies. These seeds then ripen and project outwards, literally shaping our subjective experience of reality. So reality isn't just out there, it's an interplay with this deep layer of mind.
That sounds incredibly modern, almost like something you'd hear in psychology or maybe even cognitive science discussions today. Do these ideas still resonate?
Hugely. These Buddhist insights weren't just stuck in ancient India. They massively shaped later Indian thought, but also Chinese, Tibetan, Japanese philosophy, whole cultures, and today. Absolutely. The discussions around emptiness and dependence arising, they find echoes in, say, interpretations of quantum physics, where things don't seem to have fixed properties until measured.
Yeah.
And Yogācāra's deep dive into consciousness, it has really compelling parallels with modern cognitive science, studying how the mind actively constructs our world. It shows their lasting relevance.
Okay, moving from Buddhism, we get to Jainism. And its pluralistic vision feels, well, incredibly relevant for our polarized times. What does Dasgupta spotlight there?
He really focuses on Anekāntavāda, the doctrine of many-sidedness. It's this core Jain idea that reality is just so complex, so multifaceted, that you simply cannot grasp it fully from a single viewpoint. You know the old story, blind men touching an elephant. Each insists their little piece is the whole truth. Jainism says, nope, reality is the entire elephant.
Great analogy. And that links to Syādvāda, right? How did those two work together?
They're fundamentally linked. Syādvāda is like the practical application, the method that flows from Anekāntavāda. It's the doctrine of conditional predication. Basically, any statement you make about reality is only partially true, always conditional. It depends on the context, the perspective. So you'd preface statements with syād, meaning in some respect, or maybe, in some sense it exists, in some sense it doesn't. It builds in that conditionality, that intellectual humility.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Dasgupta connects ahimsa, nonviolence, not just to actions, but to intellectual attitude. How does he make that link?
It's a crucial insight. Jnana-ahimsa isn't just about not causing physical harm. It extends to thought and speech. If you truly accept Anekāntavāda and Syādvāda, you understand that no single perspective holds the absolute, total truth. So, to rigidly insist your view is the only correct one, dismissing others, that's a kind of intellectual violence. Ahimsa then means approaching dialogue with openness, with respect, acknowledging the limits of your own understanding. It fosters respectful debate, not dogmatism.
That really makes you think, especially in today's world. Okay, so Jainism gives us this profound intellectual humility. But what about, practical self-mastery? Where does Dasgupta take us for that?
Well, that leads us straight into Sāṃkhya and Yoga. Together, they present this ancient science of mastering the inner world. Sāṃkhya starts with this fundamental dualism. There's Purusha, pure, unchanging consciousness, the silent observer. And then there's Prakriti, primordial matter, or nature. Everything else, dynamic, changing our bodies, minds, emotions, the whole material world. Liberation in Sāṃkhya comes from realizing that Purusha is totally separate from Prakriti. Understanding that I, the true self, am not my thoughts or body, but that pure awareness.
And yoga, particularly Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, that's the how-to guide for achieving that separation.
Exactly. Yoga provides the practical toolkit, the sadhana, for realizing the liberation Sāṃkhya describes. It builds right on that Sāṃkhya foundation, offering a structured path. Through asana, postures, pajuma, breath control, meditation, leading eventually to samadhi, deep absorption. The famous goal, as the sutra says, is cittavutti nirodha, stilling the fluctuations of the mind. Quieting all that mental chatter allows Purusha, pure consciousness, to recognize its own nature, free from identification with Prakriti.
So it's clearly much more than just, stretching or exercise. How does Dasgupta see its modern relevance?
Oh, absolutely. And that deep philosophical root explains why yoga resonates so much today. Yes, it's practiced globally, but often, as you say, just for physical fitness or stress relief, kind of stripped of its context. Dasgupta reminds us it's part of this complete system for liberation, grounded in a really sophisticated view of mind and reality. It's about self-mastery, ultimately.
Okay, let's shift now to Nyāya and Vaiśeṣika. Dasgupta presents these as showing an almost proto-scientific mindset in ancient India. Nyāya first logic and epistemology.
Right. Nyāya is all about rigorous logic and the theory of knowledge. They were obsessed with how we know things reliably. They identified 4 premises, or valid means of knowing: perception, pratyaksha, inference, anumana, comparison, upamana, and testimony, shabda. And they developed incredibly detailed theories of inference, how to build a valid argument, like a syllogism, and crucially, how to spot fallacies. They'd analyze, what makes an observation reliable? How do you draw a sound conclusion? Really foundational stuff for any rational inquiry.
And Vaiśeṣika sounds like its partner in this endeavor.
It really is. Vaiśeṣika is fascinatingly naturalistic, almost atomistic. They propose that reality is built from anu atoms, indivisible building blocks, and they systematically classified everything into categories: padarthas, substance, quality, action, generality, and so on. Imagine trying to map the entire universe by breaking it down into its fundamental parts and how they relate. It's an incredibly systematic, rational approach for its time.
So putting Nyāya and Vaiśeṣika together, what's the big picture that emerges?
Together, they offer this remarkably rational, structured, almost proto-scientific worldview. Their rigorous logic wasn't just for philosophical debates, though it heavily influenced them for centuries, setting the rules, basically. It also, in many ways, anticipates aspects of modern analytic philosophy. It shows this amazing commitment to precise reasoning, evidence, and systematically understanding the world.
Our journey through the volume continues with Mīmāṃsā. This seems quite different, focusing on ritual and language.
Very different focus, yes. Mīmāṃsā centers on interpreting the Vedas, specifically the Karmakāyana, the parts about rituals and duties. Their core belief was that dharma duty, righteousness, cosmic law, is known only through the Vedas, through their commands to perform specific actions. For them, performing these rituals correctly wasn't just, religious observance. It was the actual mechanism that maintained cosmic order and brought about desired results.
That does sound far from typical philosophy, doesn't it?
It does, but here's the philosophical twist. This focus forced them to develop incredibly sophisticated theories about language, meaning, and interpretation, semantics, and hermeneutics. To understand the Vedic commands, they had to analyze how words mean things, the relationship between sound and meaning, the eternal nature of Vedic sounds, shabda. They argued words have inherent power and meaning, and the Vedas are authorless and eternal. So it shows philosophy emerging directly from textual interpretation, blending linguistics and metaphysics around action and duty.
Okay, and that brings us finally to Vedanta, often called the culmination, the grand synthesis of Vedic thought. This sounds like the final word in a way.
It's certainly seen that way by many traditions. Vedanta is this huge, complex body of thought aiming to distill the ultimate philosophical truth of the Vedas, especially the Upanishads. Dasgupta shows how it branched into various schools, all wrestling with the big questions. What is ultimate reality? What is the self? How do they relate?
And the most famous school, which Dasgupta details, is Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. That one's had massive influence.
Absolutely. Shankara's Advaita is probably the best-known form. Its core teaching is non-dualism Advaita. Brahman, the absolute, unchanging, ultimate reality, is the only reality. And crucially, the individual self, the Atman, isn't just part of Brahman, it's Brahman. They're identical. So the world we see, with all its multiplicity, people, objects, that's Maya, not unreal like a hallucination, but an illusion or a misperception that veils the true non-dual reality, like mistaking a rope for a snake in dim light. The snake seems real, but it's a misapprehension of the rope.
Powerful stuff. But you mentioned other Vedanta schools too, showing debates even within this synthesis.
Right, and Dasgupta covers this well. It wasn't monolithic. While Advaita stressed absolute non-duality, others disagreed. Ramanuja's Vishyadvaita, or qualified non-dualism, said Brahman is supreme, yes, but individual souls and the world are also real aspects within Brahman, dependent on it. Then you have Madhva's Dvaita dualism, insisting on an eternal difference between God, souls, and matter. These internal arguments show the incredible philosophical richness within Vedanta itself. The ultimate message wasn't settled easily. But taken together, the Vedanta schools articulate some of the most profound and influential visions of reality and liberation in global philosophy, still shaping thought today.
Okay, let's pull back a bit and look at the big themes Dasgupta highlights across the volume. These really help tie it all together.
Yeah, he identifies some key threads running through everything. First, and you really can't stress this enough, debate is philosophy's engine. Indian philosophy absolutely thrived on this dialectic. Schools grew sharp by arguing with each other. You see it everywhere. Like Nagarjuna didn't just say Nyaya was wrong about inherent substance. He used their own logic to show its inconsistencies. How can something exist independently if it depends on causes? That forced Nyaya to refine its ideas. Then Yogācāra critiques Buddhist no-self. Buddhist critiques Sāṃkhya. It's this constant back and forth that built incredible intellectual strength. Second, there's this vital balance of theory and practice. This is quite different from a lot of Western philosophy. Indian systems always link the theory, the worldview, darshana, with the practice, the discipline, sadhana. The goal isn't just abstract knowing, it's always moksha, liberation. Whether it's Vedanta's deep contemplation, yoga's physical and mental discipline, or Jainism's ethical practice, it always leads to transformation. And third, Dasgupta himself is brilliant at comparative philosophy. He constantly draws insightful parallels and contrasts. He'll compare Nyaya logic to Aristotle, or Advaita's absolute to Neoplatonism, or Buddhist emptiness to Humean skepticism. This really highlights the universal nature of the questions being asked and the sheer sophistication of the Indian answers.
Yeah, I mean, the book itself, volume 2, it's dense. The terminology can be a hurdle for sure, but hopefully this kind of deep dive helps unlock some of that value, because it really is a goldmine for anyone interested in philosophy or, frankly, spiritual paths. It expands your whole map of human thought.
And that brings us to, why does this matter today in our world? Well, for students, it's just essential for a truly global understanding of philosophy. You can't ignore this vast tradition. For society, think about it. Jain pluralism, Buddhist interdependence, these offer powerful models for tolerance, ecological thinking, mindfulness, things we desperately need. And even for science, especially consciousness studies Nyaya's logic, Buddhist insights into mind, Vedanta's non-duality, They're surprisingly relevant to cutting-edge questions about reality and the mind.
It really is an incredible journey Dasgupta takes us on. A History of Indian Philosophy, Volume 2 feels like an intellectual pilgrimage. It's just one of the richest maps of Indian thought we have in English.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Given that these ancient traditions developed such sophisticated arguments for pluralism, for interdependence, for critical thinking, for linking theory and practice thousands of years ago, what can they genuinely teach us about navigating the complexities, the arguments, the polarizations of our own modern world? It's definitely something worth pondering.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Surendranath Dasgupta's incredible work. And please do remember to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps keep these conversations going. We'll see you next time.